San Francisco, June 1973. The set of The Towering Inferno. Two titans of cinema stand face to face, Steve McQueen, Paul Newman. The air between them could cut glass. Crew members freeze. Cameras stop rolling. The tension isn't acting. It's real, deep, personal. These men despise each other. But here's what nobody knew. The hatred wasn't about egos. It wasn't about billing. It wasn't about money. It was about something far more human, something that would haunt both men until their final days. A secret buried beneath the Hollywood machinery, a wound that never healed. One of them would take it to his grave. The other would finally speak, decades too late. Here is the story. The summer of 1973 was scorching in San Francisco, not just from the weather, from the pressure. The Towering Inferno was supposed to be the disaster epic to end all disaster epics. A 138-story skyscraper, on fire, trapped souls fighting for survival. Producer Irwin Allen had assembled the most expensive cast in Hollywood history: William Holden, Faye Dunaway, Fred Astaire, Jennifer Jones, Robert Vaughn, and at the very top of the marquee, Steve McQueen and Paul Newman. Two kings, one throne. The set itself was a pressure cooker, literal flames. Stunt coordinators running through corridors of fire, actors drenched in sweat under the California sun, pretending to be trapped in smoke-filled rooms. The budget was ballooning. The studio was watching every dollar. And in the middle of it all, two men who couldn't stand to be in the same room. Steve McQueen was at the peak of his powers. Bullet. The Getaway. Papillon. He was the king of cool, the highest paid actor in the world. Every move calculated, every glance a statement. He didn't walk onto a set. He owned it. His blue eyes were ice, his silence thunder. When Steve McQueen entered a room, you felt it in your bones. Paul Newman was Hollywood royalty. Cool Hand Luke, Butch Cassidy, and the Sundance Kid. The Sting. He had the pedigree, the Yale School of Drama, the Actors Studio. He was more than a movie star. He was an artist, a man who commanded respect not through intimidation, but through sheer presence. Those piercing blue eyes, that half smile that could disarm presidents and kings. Put them together, and you'd expect magic. Instead, you got war. From the very first day of production, the tension was palpable. McQueen arrived in his pickup truck, Newman in his Porsche. They circled each other like wolves, neither willing to submit, neither willing to blink. The crew whispered in corners. Irwin Allen lost sleep. Studio executives chewed through cigars and antacids, but here's what nobody understood. This wasn't about vanity. It wasn't about two massive egos colliding in the Hollywood stratosphere. That's what the press wrote. That's what the gossip columns sold. Two alpha males fighting for dominance. The truth was buried deeper, much deeper, and it started years before they ever set foot on that burning tower. To understand the hatred, you have to go back. Back to 1963, back to a small racing track in Southern California. Back to when Steve McQueen and Paul Newman were more than actors, they were racers. Both men shared an obsession with speed. Not the kind you fake on a movie set, real speed. The kind that gets you killed if you make one wrong move. Newman was meticulous, technical. He studied racing the way he studied scripts, every turn calculated, every gear shift precise. He raced to master himself. McQueen raced to escape himself. He was wild behind the wheel, instinctive, raw. He didn't just want to win, he needed to. Racing was the only place Steve McQueen felt truly alive, the only place where the demons from his childhood, the abuse, the abandonment, the reform schools, couldn't catch him. On that track, he was free. They met at a charity race. Newman extended his hand. McQueen shook it. They smiled for the cameras, and in that moment, a quiet competition was born. Not spoken, not acknowledged, but real. Newman started winning races. McQueen pushed harder. McQueen landed the Great Escape. Newman countered with HUD, back and forth, on screen, on the track, in life. It was a rivalry that should have been friendly, professional, even respectful. But then came Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. The role of Sundance was offered to McQueen first. He read the script, loved it. But there was a problem. The Sundance Kid had fewer lines than Butch Cassidy. McQueen's ego wouldn't allow it. He turned it down. The role went to Robert Redford. The movie became a phenomenon, a cultural juggernaut. It made Redford a superstar overnight. McQueen watched it happen, and it ate at him. Not publicly, he'd never admit it, but those close to him saw the change, the bitterness, the regret. Newman, meanwhile, was riding high. The success of Butch Cassidy elevated him to a new stratosphere. He was more than a movie star now. He was a legend. And when the Towering Inferno came together, the studio knew they needed both men. McQueen signed on as Fire Chief O'Halloran. Newman signed on as architect Doug Roberts. But McQueen had one demand, one non-negotiable condition that would send shockwaves through the production. Equal billing. Not just equal, identical. Same size font, same position on the poster, same number of lines in the script, same screen time, down to the second. McQueen's lawyers went through the screenplay with a stopwatch. They counted Newman's lines. They counted McQueen's lines. If Newman had 12 seconds more, they demanded rewrites. It was obsessive, petty, childish, and it revealed the wound underneath. Quick question. Have you ever been in a situation where someone else got the credit you deserved? Where you watched from the sidelines while someone else lived your dream? Let us know in the comments, because that's what was happening to Steve McQueen. Every accolade Newman received felt like a theft. Every award, every headline. It wasn't rational. It wasn't fair to Newman. But pain never is. And Paul Newman, he watched this unfold with a mix of confusion and frustration. He respected McQueen's talent, admired his work. But this pettiness, this scorekeeping, it offended Newman's sense of professionalism. He came from the theater, from a world where the work mattered more than the ego, where you checked your pride at the door and served the story. McQueen came from the streets, from a world where if you didn't fight for every inch, you got nothing. Two men, two philosophies, one set. The collision was inevitable. June 20th, 1973, day 37 of production. The scene: Fire Chief O'Halloran and architect Doug Roberts meet for the first time in the burning tower. It should have been one take, simple, professional. It took 19. The cameras rolled. McQueen delivered his line. Newman responded, "Cut." McQueen wasn't happy. Something about Newman's positioning. He was standing too far to the left. It drew the eye, made him the focus. They reset. Take two. McQueen changed his delivery. Slower, more deliberate, stealing the moment. Cut. Newman adjusted. Take three, back and forth, over and over. The crew watched in stunned silence. This wasn't acting. This was warfare. Irwin Allen stood behind the monitors, his face buried in his hands. The assistant director checked his watch. They were burning daylight, burning money, burning patience. But neither man would yield. By take 12, the passive aggression turned active. McQueen flubbed a line. On purpose, Newman waited. Eyebrow raised, they reset. Newman flubbed his line. McQueen smiled, cold, knowing. The game was out in the open now. No more pretense. No more Hollywood politeness. Take 16. McQueen went off script, added a line that wasn't in the screenplay. A slight dig. Nothing the audience would catch. But Newman heard it. His jaw tightened. The blue eyes went from warm to arctic in a heartbeat. Take 17, Newman responded in kind. A small improvisation, a subtle dismissal. McQueen's face flushed. The famous cool cracked. Just for a second, Irwin Allen called for a break. 15 minutes, clear the set. Get these two separated before fists started flying. In their respective corners, the truth came out. Not in words, not yet, but in the silence. McQueen sat alone in his trailer, chain-smoking, staring at nothing. His wife, Allie McGraw, tried to comfort him. He brushed her off. This wasn't something she could fix. This was something primal, something poisonous. Newman stood outside, leaning against a prop wall. Faye Dunaway approached him. "What's going on between you two?" she asked quietly. Newman shook his head. "I honestly don't know," he said. And he meant it. He genuinely didn't understand why. McQueen hated him so much. That was the cruelest part. Newman's confusion. His innocence in all this. He hadn't done anything to Steve McQueen. He'd simply existed. Simply succeeded. And in McQueen's fractured psychology, that was enough. They returned to set. Take 18. This time something shifted. McQueen delivered his line. Straight. Clean. No games. Newman responded. Equally straight. For a moment, the two men actually acted together. Actually connected. The scene worked. The chemistry that everyone had hoped for finally appeared on screen. Cut. Print. Irwin Allen exhaled. The crew applauded. A small victory. A temporary ceasefire. But as the cameras stopped rolling, McQueen and Newman turned away from each other without a word. No acknowledgement. No handshake. No eye contact. Just two men retreating to opposite sides of a soundstage, carrying wounds that neither understood how to heal. The rest of the production continued in this fashion, professionally hostile. They hit their marks, delivered their lines, made a damn good movie, but the coldness never thawed. Even at the wrap party, they stayed on opposite ends of the room. McQueen left early. Newman stayed late. And everyone who worked on that film knew they'd witnessed something tragic. Two of the greatest actors of their generation. Two men who should have been friends. Maybe even brothers. Instead, they were strangers, enemies, and nobody knew why. Until Steve McQueen got sick, November 1979. Steve McQueen was diagnosed with pleural mesothelioma, lung cancer, aggressive, terminal. He was 50 years old. The king of cool was dying. He kept it secret at first, tried experimental treatments in Mexico, refused to accept the inevitable. But by the summer of 1980, there was no denying it. He had months, maybe weeks. It was Allie McGraw who made the call. She tracked down Paul Newman, told him Steve wanted to talk. Newman was shocked. They hadn't spoken in 7 years, not since The Towering Inferno wrapped. He agreed immediately, no hesitation. They met in September 1980 at a private home in Santa Barbara, away from cameras, away from Hollywood, just two men, finally alone. What was said in that room stayed private for decades. McQueen died 2 months later on November the 7th, 1980. Newman attended the funeral, stood in the back, didn't speak, left quietly. And for years, that's where the story ended. But in 2007, 1 year before Paul Newman's own death, he gave an interview, a small publication, not widely circulated. The interviewer asked about Steve McQueen, about the rivalry, about the hatred. Newman paused, looked out the window, and for the first time, he told the truth. "Steve didn't hate me," Newman said quietly. "He hated himself." The interviewer pressed. Newman continued. "When we met that last time, he told me everything. His childhood, the abuse, the abandonment, his mother leaving him in brothels while she worked, the reform schools, the beatings. He told me that every time he looked at me, he saw everything he wasn't. I had the education, the family, the stability. I came from privilege, even if it was modest. He came from nothing. And no matter how successful he became, No matter how much money he made or how famous he got, he couldn't escape that feeling of not being good enough. Newman's voice cracked. He apologized. For all of it. The pettiness, the competition, the coldness. He said he'd wasted years hating me for something that had nothing to do with me. And then he asked me to forgive him. The interviewer asked if Newman did. Of course I did, Newman said. I told him there was nothing to forgive. I told him I understood. And I told him I was sorry too. Sorry that I never saw his pain. Sorry that I didn't reach out. Sorry that I let pride and confusion keep me from being his friend. They spent 3 hours together that day, talking, laughing, grieving, not for what was lost, but for what could have been. Two men who should have lifted each other up, who should have faced the madness of Hollywood together. Instead, they'd spent years circling each other like wounded animals. McQueen gave Newman something before he left, a small envelope. Newman didn't open it until he got home. Inside was a photograph from that charity race in 1963. The two of them shaking hands, both smiling, young, hopeful, unbroken. On the back, in McQueen's handwriting, "We could have been brothers." Newman kept that photograph on his desk until the day he died. Steve McQueen wasn't a villain. Neither was Paul Newman. They were two men carrying different kinds of pain. McQueen's pain made him defensive, competitive, combative. Newman's pain made him withdraw, protect himself, build walls. The tragedy isn't that they fought. The tragedy is that they fought alone. In a world that demands perfection, that worships strength and punishes vulnerability, neither man felt safe enough to say, "I'm hurting. I need help." So they turned that pain outward, toward each other, toward the one person who might have actually understood. Hollywood loves a rivalry. It sells tickets, generates headlines. But behind every rivalry is a story we're not told. Behind every feud is a human being struggling with demons we can't see. Steve McQueen died believing he was never good enough, despite the fame, despite the fortune, despite being the highest paid actor in the world. That little boy from Slater, Missouri, abandoned and abused, never really left him. He carried that child inside him until the very end. Paul Newman lived with regret, the regret of not seeing, not reaching out, not breaking through McQueen's walls when there was still time. He spent the rest of his life making sure he didn't make that mistake again. His charity work, his humility, his generosity. It all stemmed from that lesson learned too late. What could they have been if they'd found each other sooner? If they'd let go of pride and fear and simply been honest? We'll never know. But we have their films. We have their legacy. And we have this story. A story about two titans who fought the wrong battle. So here's the question for you. Who in your life have you pushed away because it was easier than being vulnerable? Who have you competed with when you should have been connecting? Because time is the one thing we can never get back. Steve McQueen learned that. Paul Newman learned that. Don't wait until it's too late to say what needs to be said. And unfortunately, they don't make men like Steve McQueen and Paul Newman anymore.